Fabulous. Good afternoon, everybody. See some familiar faces, well, familiar names at the moment, not faces. Well, we do see Lucy, we see Lucy. Hope everybody is okay. We've got a few more expected, so we'll keep adding people on. We are dead on 2:30, so obviously some people do come on a couple of minutes late, so that's no problem. So I'll do my little bit of a presentation first, just to introduce Alison, who is our speaker today, and then Bev will keep an eye on letting people in and everything like that. So welcome this afternoon. I hope everybody's starting to feel a little festive now. I only realised that Christmas is like next week. I only just realised that the other day. I was like, that's come up upon us. So we're on our final talk now for this whole series of rescue, reuse and regenerate, looking at how we revive and regenerate our town centres and high streets around the UK. So you've all probably heard of the Heritage Trust Network by now, because I see pretty much familiar names from most of the talks. But if you ever want to find out anything about Heritage Trust Network, please get in touch. We have over 800 plus members now across the UK, and we are readily building the professional network as well. So to get those different people involved in heritage and saving our buildings, places and structures all around the country. There are some welcome events that the Heritage Trust Network do. Just half an hour online call so you can find out a little bit more about the trust. I don't know if they're scheduled for 2024 yet. Are they, Bev? If they are, Bev will probably put a thing in the chat box.
They will be in the next couple of days, but not just yet.
So keep an eye out on those, because they're just a half an hour call just so you can find out a little bit more about the Heritage Trust Network and how you guys can get involved. Now, I know you've all used to a little bit of online etiquette, but if you could remain muted throughout the presentation, that'd be greatly appreciated. If you have any questions or comments throughout the talk with Alison today as well, please pop those into the chat box and we can relay those at the end of the event. And if you obviously want to ask questions after the event, we can unmute people as well. So please don't be scared of the chat box. We can also unmute people as well if you want to. And as always, we're happy for you to turn your camera off if you don't want to be seen, but we will probably ask you to kind of unveil yourselves at the end for a photo ready for, so we can keep that for our funders, just to show that you guys actually were here. If you have any issues at all, technical issues, getting in, dropping out, that kind of thing, please just pop either me or Bev a message and we will try and assist you as best we can from remotely for you. So please try and come back in if you drop out. We are there to let you back in as soon as we possibly can. Now, we've not just done online talks as part of this series, we've also toured the UK. So we've been to Lurgan in Northern Ireland, we've been to Stirling in Scotland, in England we've done Reading and Manchester, and we've also been to Wales and Haverfordwest. So we've been around about and spoke to over 200 people about this fascinating topic, about regenerating our town centres. We've had some fascinating talks, great workshops and some brilliant tours, really inspiring stories, and it's just been great to discuss the whole element. But as I say, this is the final talk this afternoon as part of this series, and we are delighted that Alison is on for us today to talk about Bangor, an arts-based regeneration in a seaside town. And Alison is celebrating today because they've been announced as the National Lottery Heritage Fund Project of the Year. So we're very lucky to have Alison because she's been celebrating all morning, been on the radio very, very early. So we are very, very lucky to have her this afternoon to bring her away from her celebrations to deliver this talk. And then I'm sure she'll be having a few glasses of bubbles later on as well. So we are really looking forward to hearing from you today, Alison. And there is Alison on the screen. You'll see her come up in a moment as well. She's the Development Director and co-founder of the Open House Festival and Bangor Cult House. So we are very excited today for this talk. And thank you everybody who's joined us, whether you've booked on an individual ticket or a series ticket, or even if you've been to those and also come to an in-face event. It's been absolutely fabulous. So thank you very much for joining us. And as always, thank you to the players of the National Lottery who have funded to help us deliver this event series. So I'm now going to stop sharing and I'm going to ask Alison if she can now share her screen, and we'll get going with our sixth and final talk. So thank you, Alison.
Thank you very much. Can you see that? Thanks,
Yeah,
Hannah.
no problems. Yeah.
Okay, great. Right, I've got my tech guy, Scott, here. He's grinning away at me. Yeah, done it. Right, I think we're live and we can go. Really delighted to be here. Thanks a million, Scott. I'll give you a shout if it all goes horribly wrong at any point. Yeah, it's been a big morning for us. We were nominated one of nearly 4,000 National Lottery projects nominated for an award. We then got shortlisted for the big award, which is the Project of the Year, across all the National Lottery projects, went to public vote and we won it. So there was a big kind of press thing this morning and Gary Lightbody from Snow Patrol presented us with our award because he's from Bangor and he's a big supporter of the project. So yeah, it's been very exciting. So if I'm a bit all over the place, please forgive me. So I'm going to just tell you really what we've done and how we did it. We're very much a grassroots organisation. We're an arts organisation, so heritage was not our first remit. We've, I suppose, come to heritage by accident, but I think the power of arts combined with heritage is very powerful. So this is the courthouse, a nice evening view of it. But I'm going to take you right back to the early 90s, whenever I met my future husband, Kieran Gilmore. We met in London, like many people from Northern Ireland. We left here and I went to study. He went to manage a band. We met in London through the music scene in the early 90s. And there was a very new, vibrant Irish traditional music scene taken off really around on the back of Riverdance and the beginning of the Celtic Tiger economy and so on. I sang in bands, he managed bands, we got very involved and we saw, I suppose we saw placemaking happening. We saw how the identity of the Republic of Ireland was changing and it was becoming cool to be Irish, and Irish music and the arts were very much at the forefront of that. We saw this also happening because we lived in South London and we saw the Docklands starting to change. We saw places like Edinburgh becoming synonymous with the festival. And I suppose we became interested in, we didn't know the word placemaking at the time, but a good friend of ours gave us this document, The Art of Regeneration by Charles Landry. And we realized that that's what we were interested in. We started to put on events. We started working with the Northern Ireland Tourist Board, bringing traditional musicians and instrument makers over from Northern Ireland and taking them to folk festivals around England and Scotland, and really trying to create a different identity for Northern Ireland, away from the Troubles. Anyone who's much younger than me will not remember that, but Northern Ireland was synonymous with the Troubles at that time. And so the idea of cultural tourism was, you know, I mean, it was a fantasy. But we realized that what we were interested in was putting on events that would give people in Northern Ireland a shared identity. So the signing of the Good Friday Agreement in 1998 was a trigger for us to go back to Northern Ireland, to try and do something with music and arts that would help create a kind of new Northern Ireland. So Kieran went back in 98, I followed in 99, and we started a very small festival in the Cathedral Quarter in Belfast. Belfast was really a very divided city at the time, but there was a big government project, Regeneration project, to redevelop right along the River Lagan. And there were different zones. One of the latest zones to be developed is the Titanic Quarter, which is kind of world famous now. But one of the first quarters was the Cathedral Quarter. And this was, you know, old derelict buildings around the cathedral near the docks in Belfast. But for us, it was perfect because it was one of the few politically neutral bits of Belfast. It was very central, close to transport links, and there were small grants available for people to do cultural events. So we became the first festival to take place in the Cathedral Quarter. And we started a little traditional music festival. I mean, this is what the Cathedral Quarter looked like at the time. It was mostly derelict buildings, and the cathedral was surrounded by waste ground. There were no venues, so our first festival, we put events on in the cathedral. And on the first night, our car was stolen when we came out. We spent the night in the police station and then had to go and retrieve it from a very rough area of Belfast. We used the Blackthorn. There aren't even any photographs of what it was like. It's now the Spaniard and one of the trendiest bars in Belfast. And we used the Duke of York, an old man's bar, which again is in a very trendy part of the Cathedral Quarter. And one of the presenters from BBC dubbed us the Two Pubs in a Cathedral Festival. So over the next 15 years, we kind of, I suppose, learned our craft. We started from small gigs and we just learned from trial and error, and we built a community of interest around our festival. And we went from small gigs that were mostly Irish traditional. We started to embrace broader folk and roots music, a lot of Americana. We had the likes of C6 Steve. New pubs were opening up in the area, like the John Hewitt. From reading the list, most of you are not from Northern Ireland, so you won't necessarily know this part of Belfast. But from being a really deserted, rundown bit of Belfast, it became the trendiest part, the heart of Belfast's nightlife. We started to put on big events like Chili Fest. And then in 2010, our festival was really massive. We had bands like Old Crow Medicine Show, Dave Rawlings Machine, and Mumford & Sons. So we had a 2,000 capacity marquee. We ran for a week. It had really become quite a major event and quite a phenomenon in the Belfast calendar. So Belfast was really undergoing a renaissance at this time, a cultural renaissance. It became known as the City of Festivals. Cultural tourism was flourishing. The economy was growing. It was a really trendy place to be. But at the same time, my hometown of Bangor, where we were living and bringing up a family, was undergoing the same fate as many seaside towns around the UK and Ireland. So Bangor is 14 miles along the coast from Belfast. It's got a railway link. It's got an airport. Belfast City Airport is between Belfast and Bangor. It's beautiful. I mean, it is absolutely wonderful coastline, golf clubs, and all the rest of it. It used to have a beach right down the seafront, but Bangor really, and in Victorian times, it was known as the Brighton of Ireland. It effectively became subsumed by Belfast. It became kind of a suburb of Belfast. Some really bad planning decisions took away the beach and put in a marina. And between the marina and the town centre, huge car parks and lots of trees. So basically our seafront effectively disappeared. Then there was the building of the ring road. And sorry, here's some more pictures of our seafront. That's overlooking the marina. And these used to be all hotels and shops. There was a cinema there. There were, I mean, it was a thriving, bustling place. It's the third biggest town in Northern Ireland, after Belfast and Derry. And we actually got city status last year in 2022, which for us is a game changer. And here's one of the iconic hotels on the seafront, the Royal Hotel, which is going to be demolished because it's in such bad state. But we had the same kind of planning decisions that have blighted many towns. So the ring road was built and a series of out-of-town shopping centres and peripheral housing estates, including Bloomfield Shopping Centre, which is up for sale again for £22 million. It's a 31-acre site, and it's effectively the economic heart of Bangor now. So most people go and shop at Bloomfield and the other 2 or 3 big retail centres outside the ring road, or they go to Belfast. We have actually been part of the Belfast Metropolitan Area Plan for a long time, so we're treated as a subsidiary, town, like a dormitory town for Belfast. And way back in 2002, part of the Belfast Metropolitan Area Plan estimated that Bangor was leaking in excess of £80 million a year, mostly to Belfast in terms of spend, and that's mostly leisure and retail. So we had that donut effect of the town centre had wasted away. But because we had a seafront, we had only half a donut. We didn't even have a whole donut, because the seafront was effectively taken away. So Bangor lost its identity as a seaside town, and the town centre retail failed. We had also the problems of the Troubles. There had been some bombs, so some of the units in the centre were destroyed and so on. So there were kind of multiple problems, and we ended up for the last few decades with lots of empty units. Then a lot of dereliction, transient populations moving in, lots of houses of multiple occupation and so on. There was a huge big shopping centre built right on the seafront in Bangor, the flagship centre. It has now been completely closed and derelict for several years. Although thankfully it's been bought by a local business and they are trying to find a reuse for it, and I really wish them all the best. So anyway, after we had been running our festival in Belfast for 15 years, people started to say to us, well, why don't you come and start a festival in Bangor? Belfast doesn't need any more festivals, Bangor does. And we thought about it, and actually it was becoming a very crowded scene for the arts in Belfast. There were so many festivals, and the commercial promoters were moving in. So it was actually becoming quite a hostile environment to be running events. So talking to local artists, and we also realised through our box office that we were drawing big audiences from Bangor. So people from Bangor were coming to Belfast to our festival. They were going to restaurants and bars, spending their money. We were part of the problem. So we thought, okay, well, maybe if we moved the festival to Bangor, we could be part of the solution. So we got together with some local artists like Colin Bateman. I don't know if any of you know of him. He's an author from here, an old friend, and he lives in Bangor. And we got some other creatives, and we basically pulled together a festival in Bangor, and we ran it in parallel for a couple of years with the Belfast Festival. And then eventually we just did Bangor, and we moved the whole festival to Bangor. Bangor, although it's the 3rd largest conurbation town, now city, in Northern Ireland, it had no civic theatre or arts centre or dedicated music venue, nothing at all. And yet it has an incredibly rich history of music, arts, culture. It was known as the Brighton of Ireland. It was full of dance halls and cinemas. And I mean, I live here because my parents moved here because of the dance halls. It also has a really rich musical history. So, Gary Lightbody and Snow Patrol are from here, Two Door Cinema Club, Foy Vance, I could go on. So there's a real, it was called the Brighton of Ireland for a reason. There's been a very rich cultural history. And so when we moved the festival here, we just started doing events anywhere that would have us. So we used pubs, we did folk on a boat, we screened Jaws in the local swimming pool, we screened the Guns of Navarone in an old World War II fort. We did house gigs, we did burlesque in a tattoo parlour, we started a community choir, and we built the festival up. And by just before COVID, we were running for a full month of August, about 160 events in about 60 different venues. here's one of our favourite venues. This is the Walled Garden at Bangor Castle. And we put in a beautiful red stretch tent and turn it into a 400 capacity theatre effectively for the month. And we would have all kinds of artists there, from like the Waterboys, who trying to think who else you would know. We had James Nesbitt there doing an interview, Beth Orton. We do all kinds of food and drink events, literary events, book readings, theatre, you name it. Whatever's going to get people involved, that's what we do. And we try and bring people in and, I suppose, show them Bangor from a different light. So here's the bandstand in our local park, Ward Park. So every Sunday throughout July and August, we put on free gigs. It's not a huge thing. You know, we have a PA, you know, we have a team. We've got over 100 volunteers on our volunteer team, and they're wonderful. But we put bands on, and we have up to 5,000 people every Sunday come with a picnic and their folding chairs and watch these bands. We got funding. So we've, over the years, we've become more adept at getting funding. The very first funding we got was from the Laganside Corporation to start our festival way back in 1999. And that little bit of seed funding enabled us to grow, learn, until the biggest funding we ever got was from the National Lottery Heritage Fund for a placemaking project called Seaside Revival. And that was a 3-year project where we would do a big outdoor vintage festival on the seafront. But during the year leading up to it, we were doing lovely kind of outreach projects. So we had sewing social, we had swing dance classes, you know, we had upcycling projects. We worked with the local camera club, looking at old photographs, and then looking at, you know, those places now and so on. So, you know, Seaside Revival was a kind of side project that tagged along with our festival. That was Seaside Revival there. This is some of our team, our volunteers. There's my husband, Kieran, who's the festival director, our festival choir, who we've got over 70 in it now, and they're great. And to try and involve the local, you know, to try and really make it a festival about place, about Bangor. We used as many venues as possible, but we also included local businesses who couldn't be venues in a Festival Friends scheme. And we grew that until we had about 150 businesses involved. So they would offer deals and discounts to our festival ticket holders throughout the month of August. So it meant that our ticket holders got discounts on goods and services, but it also helped drive business into these, you know, local businesses, many of whom are really struggling. And it was everything from, you know, restaurants, and there's a hairdresser, Nicholas Graham, wall hangers, framing, I mean, all kinds of businesses. But I think the main thing was it connected us with all those local businesses. Everybody felt that they were part of something. And I mean, we were doing this trial and error, and I know we often got things wrong, but I think people were just so grateful that that anybody was trying to do anything for them. You know, that we were trying to create some positivity and a bit of buzz, and you know, like we had a whole team who made bunting, miles and miles of bunting from donated bedding, and then packaged it up into little parcels and took it round all the businesses, and they put the bunting up, and they put their Festival Friends plaque up. You know, and it really did feel like Bangor was coming together to help itself. During COVID, things, obviously it, you know, it all kind of came crashing down that first spring. We were just about to launch our program. COVID hit, and we realized we couldn't do a festival. We did some online stuff, but it doesn't really work very well. So instead we did some street art. So we did lots of big murals around Bangor, which people really loved. that you can only see part of that. That's a lovely mermaid. And, you know, we kind of got through, and then we emerged from COVID to do a big open air show on Bangor seafront in front of the marina. It was an acoustics show with Snow Patrol last year when Gary Lightbody was given the freedom of the borough. So that was, you know, a really a kind of pinnacle for us and the festival. So anyway, going back a bit alongside the festival, when we moved to Bangor in 2013, coincidentally, the same year, Bangor Courthouse became empty. In fact, that's what it looked like then, a bit sad. So Bangor Courthouse is a beautiful and important building. It's right on Bangor seafront overlooking the marina. It was built in 1866 as a bank. Very prestigious building, grade B2 listed. In the 1950s, it became a magistrates court as the banks were moving away from the seafront. And a lot of work was done to it. Here we are, that's it as a bank, and with the bank manager originally there. And this is you know, when Bangor was in its heyday, when it was a really thriving seaside town. And then it became a courthouse in the 1950s. And then during the 70s, it was heavily fortified during the Troubles. And here is what used to be the bank manager's lovely garden, turned into brutalist fortifications. So this building was lying empty. A group of local people got together to start a campaign to try and save the building and stop it falling down. And we got involved and then took that project on. For us, it's a really important building for many reasons. Architecturally, it's important, but it has effectively charted the history of Bangor and its changing fortunes for the last 150 years. So it was built as a bank in 1866, the year after the railway arrived in Bangor. So Bangor went from being a small little harbour town with linen at the basis of its economy. It suddenly, with the arrival of the railway, it boomed as a Victorian seaside resort. Its beaches flourished. It became really a national tourism destination. And that's how I remember it as a child, because I'm quite old. And then watching it falling into dereliction, it just felt like this building had told the story of Bangor's rise and fall. And we thought if we could reclaim it, bring it back to life through music, art and culture, it would help to regenerate Bangor and give local people hope. And it would be a physical manifestation of what we had been trying to do as a festival. So we basically set about, there were two challenges. The first was raise £2 million to restore it. We didn't think we needed that much when we started, but once we got going, we realized we did. We needed to get the ownership of the building, and we had no money to buy it. So the best route was to try and secure ownership through community asset transfer. There's legislation for it here, but but nobody has ever managed to get that over the line in Northern Ireland. We'd never done a capital project before. We're an arts organisation, so we didn't really know how to do it. And then I don't know what I was going to put there, create a sustainable business, I think. You know, and once we salvaged it, run it, you know, as a successful business. So fundraising, we got a little bit of development money from the National Lottery Heritage Fund, which was brilliant to do a feasibility study, and some money from the Architectural Heritage Fund. And then we went out and did a big crowdfunding campaign. And between that and a gala ball, we raised, our crowdfunding campaign raised £70,000. And that was absolutely invaluable because it showed community buy-in. It kind of rallied local support around us. and it gave us money that was unrestricted that we could use immediately in order to get things going. National Lottery Heritage Fund pledged the money, if a big chunk of money, if we could get ownership of the building. And that enabled us then to go and raise more money from the likes of Garfield Weston Foundation and other funders, our local council, and so on. The Department for Communities became very involved because they were the government department who were trying to get community asset transfer over the line. So they basically realised if they were able to put a bit of money in to close the funding gap, that would help us get the community asset transfer through. So, you know, it was a parallel process that went on. We got involved in about 2015, and the project was only completed last year in 2022. So what, 7 years? So it was a very complicated, convoluted trial and error process. We also needed to go away and raise money then for fixtures and fittings and PA equipment, and we decided to put a stretch tent up in the rear yard and turn it into an outdoor space and so on. So we've done lots of fundraising, and lots of great small trusts and organisations have fallen in to help with fixtures and fittings, and with some posts as well. So that's on the left, you can see that's our crowdfunders, and we have a huge big poster framed in the porch in the courthouse to thank them as they come in. So the community asset transfer, we had to, that was a very long process because none of the civil servants knew how to do it because they had never done it here before. So there was a kind of business plan, a big business plan that had to be done, lots of meetings. And we also had the added difficulty of the collapsing of the assembly. So the meetings had been going on with various government departments, the Department of Justice, who owned the building, the Department of Finance, who were looking at the financial case for it, the Department for Communities, who were looking at the community benefit that would come out of the transfer, and then the Minister for Justice at the time, Claire Sugden, was very supportive, and she pulled a big group of people together and said, you've got to get this over the line, gave us a letter, and a week later the assembly collapsed and there was no assembly for 3 years. So if we hadn't had that letter, the project would have been dead in the water at that point. But anyway, we did our business planning. We had to show there was a need for the project. There was no other arts music venue in Bangor. And there was an audience there who wanted it. There was an arts community who needed a platform. So there was community buy-in, and we were able to prove that through our fundraising and also through all the years of data from our festival. So thank goodness, we'd been logging all our box office data, so we had all the evidence there. We also had to prove that because it's community asset transfer, that the community benefit would exceed the commercial value if they just sold the asset. So we did a social return on investment exercise to show that. This was all stuff that we'd never had to do before, a lot of it. We had to show that there was a sustainable business. So we were able to look at, we were used to budgeting our festival and festival events. So we looked at, well, what program would we put into the courthouse? What would we charge for events? How much would artists cost? What would staffing needs be, and all the rest of it? And we were able to then come up with I think it was a 5-year business plan showing what the income and expenditure would be, the level of activity, how many customers we thought we'd get through, and how then that would translate into a sustainable business and, the benefit to the local community. So it was a big exercise. And then finally, the funding came in and the community asset transfer was secured. And there is Naomi Long, who was the Justice Minister at the time, in between the two collapsing of Stormont. There was a window when we had a government for a while, and we had a minister again, and she gave us the keys in 2020. So I'm going to just show you a little bit about the courthouse. So when we took it over, that's the porch. So the main room was the courtroom. Originally, it was the banking hall. And the rest of the building was the bank manager's family home. So this was the only public room. And when we took it over, that's what it looked like. You can see the ceiling was falling and there was water pouring through. That was the benches where the judge sat at the back. There's the dock on the left, and then a door that leads into the cells, the holding cells. And then the public and so on would have sat at the front here. I mean, it's a stunning building. It has beautiful big sash windows, beautiful cornicing and so on. Some of the features were destroyed when it became a court, but many of them were still there and just needed to be loved. So we stripped back the horrible 80s wood paneling that had gone in and found the original wainscoting. The place really had to be gutted, all new services. We found lovely details like this, you know, from the banking era. We found under the horrible flooring, beautiful tiled floor, the same as what was in the porch. So that was all reclaimed. Of course, this all happened. We got the building just as COVID hit. So we did a bit of meanwhile use in the building with local artists who came in and used it safely for recording videos, for rehearsals and so on. It gave us a bit of a breather as well to tweak our plans. And then post-restoration, here is what the courtroom looks like. We knocked through into the room behind. That's the beautiful floor that we salvaged. So this room is now 210 capacity for standing, full-on gigs, 95 for seated. And that would be everything from comedy to our film club, seated gigs and so on. That's the staging, so that's the other end of the room. So that's the courtroom now, stage with the curtains open in daylight, and that's it with a band in. So yeah, it's just an amazing space. I'll show you another space. So this originally was it would have been the bank manager's dining room. Then when it was a court, it was subdivided into small interview rooms. But we uncovered the fireplace. There was another room that would have been the old kitchen. And we've knocked the two rooms through. You can see where the range would have been. The windows were all taken out, fully restored on site. You know, all new floors. I mean, it was a massive job. A lot of structural work. When we knocked walls down, we had to make sure that these beautiful friezes were not damaged. And here is our team. That's that room now. So those two rooms knocked together are our theatre bar, and we call it the Open Arms Bar. That's our courthouse crew. So this is what it looks like now. You can see the beautiful slate fireplace, which we salvaged from the Royal Hotel. It's one I showed you earlier, the big one with the crane outside it, which is 2 doors down long on the seafront, which is going to be demolished. We got into it, we were given permission to get in, and we were able to salvage the fireplace and the bars. You can see the lovely cornicing up around here. There's the fireplace and the bar, our lovely bar crew. So in this room, it's a bar, but we have lots of performances in it. Every Saturday, we've got traditional Irish music sessions. We do small gigs, you know, solo shows and so on. And then upstairs, we've knocked all the rooms through into one. Originally, they were like interview rooms and offices. You can see all suspended ceilings, very unloved, very corporate, that's where you would have gone to pay your fines or get your divorce or your dog license. I mean, you can see how old. I'm sure a lot of you who are involved in heritage will know these, you know, how buildings were built then. but you can see the beautiful sash windows that have been all reclaimed. You can see the view there. There's the Mermaid on that building just overlooking the sea. So this is what this room looks like now. We call it the drawing room because part of it would originally have been the drawing room. Again, there's a bar up here, which was salvaged from the local hotel, but this is a really popular room for shows. We have, well, tonight we've got a jazz trio on, which is 3 young local guys who are amazing jazz musicians. We have poetry and a pint. We do drink and draw, a bit of a theme in there. You know, we do book club, lots of different events. We've done craft fairs, art exhibitions. We're gathering a really good collection of art for ourselves now. The old cells, the holding cells, we've done some artist stuff in there, but they've now all been turned into the toilets. I don't have any pictures of them currently as toilets, but they're very beautiful. And the rear yard, which is all fortified, which feels a wee bit like a kind of Berlin type sort of space. We've put a stretch tent up and an outdoor bar, and we're just waiting on our entertainment license, and that is going to be our 4th performance space for us. So yeah, in the last, well, we opened October last year, and in the first 12 months, we had 35,000 people through the door. About half our events are ticketed and about half are free. We do a lot of, you know, surveying of our audiences. We know that 50% of people eat or drink somewhere else before or after a show. We only have a theatre license for alcohol, so we're only open when we've got an event on. We're usually open Thursday, Friday, Saturday afternoon, Saturday night, often on a Wednesday or a Sunday, choir rehearsals Tuesday. But very much we want to complement what the local offer is. We're a destination venue and we try and work collaboratively. Other local restaurants will offer meal deals for our ticket holders and so on. And from our surveys, we know that more than 80% of people, if they hadn't been at our event, they would have stayed at home. And about 10% would have done something else outside of Bangor. So we know that we're having an economic impact in Bangor. I think it's 94% satisfaction rating from our customers. We've had over 400 events in the first year, which is roughly about 8 a week. About 55% of artists performing here are from Bangor, from our local creative community. We've had more than 1,000 performances of individual performances within those 400 events. And over 600 individual artists. Sorry, blinding you with figures there. So yeah, we're absolutely delighted with how the courthouse has gone, what the reaction has been. And we think it's a springboard and a trigger for the future of Bangor, the centre and the waterfront. Getting city status was a huge deal for us. There are also 2 major infrastructure projects in the pipeline, but they've been so long in the making that a lot of local people are really skeptical whether they're going to happen. We believe they will, but I think seeing the courthouse up and running, is helping people to see that maybe something can change. So there's a big waterfront, Bangor waterfront plan, which is funded under the Belfast Region City deal, that will upgrade 2 miles of coast. So connecting beaches at either end of Bangor, Skipping Stone Beach and Ballyholme Beach, and connecting them both back into the centre with some major interventions and public realm works. There's also Queen's Parade development, the derelict bit of the seafront I showed you earlier on. This is what it may look like if and when Queen's Parade development, which is a £50 million plus private development on a huge 13-acre site. And as part of it, some levelling up money has recently been secured to turn all that car parking space that's between the marina and Bangor Centre to landscape that and turn that into public space, which will be amazing for events and for leisure activities. The Royal and the Windsor hotels, which are just next to us, are in the planning process at the moment, and hopefully are going to be hospitality units on the ground floor and apartments above. And as I said, a local business have bought the flagship and have plans to do interesting things with it. As far as open house goes, there's a potential phase 2 for the courthouse as part of the Belfast Region City deal, which we're working towards. We've also started working with a group of local traders to create a Bangor bid, a business improvement district. It's in its infancy, it's in the very first stages, but we feel the time is right and that Bangor really needs the business community to come together, you know, and start to market what we have. And now we've got city state as well. I mean, we could go for UK City of Culture eventually, couldn't we? Why not? We can dream. You know, I think you've got to be ambitious and build on your success. You know, and even if we never got there, going through the process of applying, I think would be a really great experience. I think I've talked long enough, haven't I? Will I stop sharing now? And I think, is that the last slide? It is, yeah. I'll stop sharing.
Fab. Thank you, Alison. Wonderful. Well, I think, you know, you're saying about ambition. I think everything you've done has been so ambitious, but you've ticked every single one off, and so successfully by the sounds of it. So I don't think that would phase you at all, to be honest, which is is absolutely brilliant. But thank you very much for taking us through your journey from a festival all the way to the courthouse. So thank you very much. I hope that's inspired quite a few people on here. So I'm going to ask if anybody has got any questions at all for Alison while we have her. Is there anybody there? I'll start because I've got a few. You are obviously new development wise, you said about the Queen's Parade, and obviously you mentioned about venue space there. If that, obviously 50 million is a big development, how do you feel that if it got up and running, which obviously not for a few years yet, how will that, do you think, impact on what you're already doing at the courthouse sort of thing? Because then you would be kind of a little guy in a big, sort of kind of overshadowed by a bigger place.
No, we'd be delighted. We regularly talk to the developer. He comes and asks our advice on things. Wayne Hemingway has been a consultant in charge of the vision on that project. Many of you will know Wayne Hemingway as a social designer who's been involved in lots of projects, the likes of Margate and Morecambe and so on. So no, we really work collaboratively with all those other partners. You know, I think we all see that no single person or entity or project can save a town or a city. You know, we all have to work together. As part of that Queen's Parade development, you know, when they create the lovely public round space leading down to the marina, you know, we want to come and do events on it. So our, you know, the music in the park that we do on Sundays during the summer, we'd love to come and do that down on the seafront on Saturdays. And the developer would love that because that would animate the space. You know, and we've also really pushed the developer to try and, you know, engage with local creative businesses, you know, and try and get some of those in as tenants of some of the premises whenever it's up and running, because those are the things that will attract people. You know, if you've got you know, creative businesses and, you know, interesting places to visit. So no, it's there's no competition at all. We want to work hand in hand with you know, everybody else who's trying to do something good for Bangor.
Brilliant. Thank you, Alison. Yeah, you certainly got the partnerships going with your, you know, your 150 festival friends. I think that's, you know, it already shows that you kind of work in collaboration, and it's always the best way, I think, isn't it? Wonderful. Bev, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, I just thought it would be really useful, as we've got lots and lots of local authority delegates here today, more than we would normally have at our event. So it's great to see you all. You're very welcome. But I think it would be really great if Alison had any sort of top tips for grassroots heritage people and local authorities for working together, or maybe, you know, something specifically for local authority people to think about? We often hear it from the other side, so it would be great.
Yes, well, our local authority is Ards and North Down Borough Council, and they have been really supportive since the start. They have given us funding for our festival. In fact, when we held our first festival here, it was the Bangor centenary. And so they gave us some money to kind of help celebrate the centenary, and that kind of cemented bringing the festival to Bangor. So they've been really supportive. We've worked with their arts team, with their tourism team. We initially were funded through their Regeneration team, because very often arts is quite low down the agenda. You know, we've worked with economic development, so we have relationships in lots of departments across the council, because we feel that we kind of straddle all those things. I think sometimes people struggle to kind of pinpoint exactly what we do, but I mean, for us, it's not in boxes, you know. Placemaking, I think, brings many strands into it. But we've been very lucky, you know, we have some really great supporters. We also have found that the Bangor Central councillors, although they come from all the different political parties, will work collaboratively and will, you know, on specific things that will benefit Central Bangor. So we've had good relationships with all of them as well. The council were really instrumental in the whole community asset transfer process and raising the money. They gave us a little bit of money for the project, but they didn't have a capital funding program. So is that a cat there? Hello. They didn't have a capital funding program, so they were only able to give us a little bit of money. But what they could do was, you know, they hosted meetings in their, you know, council offices up at, you know, in Bangor Castle on the hill, you know, with the likes of, you know, Department of Justice and Department for Communities and Heritage Fund and different funders. So they kind of showed that they were right behind us or beside us, and that we were part of their strategic plan. So there was a new integrated strategy that was developed. Gosh, I mean, well, it's within the last decade. It's since we moved the festival here, but they very much involved us in that. And that new strategy really puts art and culture and leisure and the seafront all at the heart. So we felt that we were part of that process. They were listening to us. They saw the vision that we saw. And it was very different from the vision for Bangor that there was, you know, a couple of decades ago, when it was all about retail. So the council have been hugely supportive throughout this whole process. And there were quite a few of them were here this morning for our event. And, you know, we feel that they know there's things that we can do that they can't. Because we have the freedom as an independent organisation to just get on and do stuff. But yeah, they're good. We're very lucky.
Fabulous. Thank you for that question, Bev. Yes, it's been an interesting journey with us with that, because we also had the Historic Coventry Trust, City Coventry Trust on as well, and they're working with their council. So it's interesting, because not everybody has always got a supportive council or vice versa. So sometimes it's interesting to hear kind of your opinions as well. So wonderful. Thank you for that, Alison. Is there any other questions from anybody at all, or any comments? By all means, if you've got any comments about the courthouse or anything that you've seen on the presentation, please, by all means, unmute yourselves and we can get those undone. We've got a quiet lot today, Bev, haven't we? Bev has asked for a couple. Oh, hang on, we've got a question from John. How did you consult the local community on the plans of the courthouse? Did the vision of the venue come firstly from the success of open house? Were there any communities with low engagement that you wanted to reach out to?
We were, because we already ran a festival and had audiences, we're talking to our audiences all the time. Our community, well, we did have one big public meeting that people came to, although that wasn't specifically about the courthouse. But rather than a kind of formal engagement process, we just invited people in for tours of the courthouse and talked to them. So hundreds of people in sort of twos and threes, many of the local businesses, restaurants, bars, hoteliers, chefs, people from the heritage sector, artists, people who we thought would use or be part of the future of the courthouse. And they did, help us design the building. So at one point, the upstairs we were going to keep it as separate rooms for offices until we got feedback from people. Well, what are you doing having your staff sitting up here? Put your staff in a wee room at the back and open this up for public space and put a kitchen. And that's what we've done. And the kitchen will be opening this year, so we can do pop-ups. So rather than it being a kind of formal consultation process, it was very much, I think how we've always done it was just through relationships with people. Lots of tours, lots of talking. And we have, I think it was like 300 or 400 people that came through the doors over 2 or 3 years, just telling us what they would do with it. As far as when it came down to the actual design, we just did that ourselves because we had a very clear vision of what we wanted. Because we've been running the festival for so long, we've used so many venues and so many spaces. We had a very clear vision of what we wanted to do, something that the history of the building would be in every element, not because I have an aversion to going into old buildings that have been renovated and they look very sterile and clean, and then the history is written on history boards at the door, but you feel you leave that once you walk in. We wanted it to feel like an old house. So we have left, for example, some of the old peeling plaster in bits. We've all exposed surfaces, so you can see all the ceiling heights. We've got the old stripped floorboards with old rugs put down. So much of the furniture is reclaimed, donated. Pictures on the walls are just donated by local artists. We've got, I don't know if anybody knows, local Irish artists, but we've got a Colin Middleton and we've got a Neil Shaw cross painting of another local artist, So I suppose the actual design of it was mainly by ourselves, informed by, our local communities. But I think in quite an organic sort of a way. That's probably not much help.
Has that answered your question, John? Are you able to show us with a thumbs up or something? Hopefully that's answered your question. But
yeah,
yes,
great. Thank you very much. Yeah, sorry. I'm just this is sort of a question that is sort of tailored to I guess to my interest in terms of thinking about working with a venue so we're based in Liverpool, and there's a venue that is in one of the smaller communities, so outside the city centre, and it was just the idea of like trying to make an accessible venue for various like marginalised communities that don't have access to culture much beyond going into the city centre. So I'm kind of interested in that side of things, and thinking about different communities that don't necessarily get like a particular cultural program. So, you know, in Liverpool, like with the music scene, it's mostly kind of like rock and indie music. So it's trying to think about, okay, well, the multicultural communities that are in South Liverpool, how do we sort of cater for them as well?
Yep. We made the building as accessible as we could. So we put in a lift, and we've got accessible toilets, and our outdoor bar has a, you know, dropped section for wheelchair and mobility users and so on. As far as our programming, we try and be as broad as we can within reason in our programming. So, you know, DJs to jazz to, you know, we have some 70-year-olds who have a band, you know, who used to play gigs in the 70s and so on. We are also conscious of not trying to be all things to all people, and we are stretched to our absolute capacity with what we're doing. So running the festival, getting the building up and running, you know, I think we will probably do more individual projects as we go on with different communities when we have the capacity to do it. So, for example, we've hooked up with MenCap and a local Bangor Gateway project, and we did a disco for adults with learning disabilities. And that was a really big success, and all our staff were trained around that. So now we've created a partnership. We plan to do that on a regular basis. Bangor Pride is a very new thing. I think this year was only the second Pride there has been in Bangor, but we hosted a series of events as part of Pride. So again, we'll do that next year. So, you know, this is a kind of small rural location on, you know, on the edge of Northern Ireland, with a, you know, a very different community, I think, or range of communities that you would have in Liverpool. But we, you know, we will reach out as much as we can. I mean, a big thing for us here in Northern Ireland is crossing the, you know, political divide, the sort of Catholic Protestant divide. Kieran and I are from different sides of the political and religious divide here, although neither of us are particularly political or religious, which I think really helps. So for us, creating a venue that is politically neutral is a big thing in Northern Ireland, you know, where we can have events from people from all sides, and you know, maybe events that might naturally have their place in one community or the other, but can sit comfortably side by side here. So yeah, we want to be as diverse and as welcoming as we can, but we have to also be realistic about how much we can do and when.
That's great. Thank you very much.
Thank you, John. That actually leads very nicely onto Jenna's question, with you saying about, you know, your capacity and being stretched and whatnot. So Jenna's put here, thanks, Alison. Obviously yours and others' passion and living in a place so understanding has paid off for you. Have you managed to make a living as well as do all of this?
Yes, we have. So it started off, you know, kind of as a hobby. You know, we were both just mad about music, and gradually, you know, we started to. I also worked in communications, and we started to, you know, earn a little bit from it. We set the organization up as a charity with a board of trustees, and eventually we were paid a salary. Eventually, about 5 or 6 years ago, we even got a pension scheme, which was amazing. Not that we'll ever be able to afford to retire, but yes, we now have 7 full-time paid staff. So we are 2 of 6 core staff. So there's the 2 of us. There's a courthouse director. That's Rachel Campbell-Palmer, who specifically runs the courthouse, while Kieran and I work across the courthouse and festival and other projects. We have an events manager, we have a digital marketing manager, and we have a full-time finance person now as well. We went out and got funding for 3 years for the finance manager and the digital marketing manager from dormant accounts for one of them, and from COVID recovery money from another. And the funding for the courthouse manager was actually part of the National Lottery Heritage Fund capital money. They were very good and gave us some money for activating the venue. And for us, the most important thing was having somebody with experience of running a venue to do that. So that came within that budget the first 3 years. Although it also means that then there's a cliff edge coming up in a couple of years' time when all that funding will come to an end. But yes, it is now a very full-time job for both of us. I mean, it has basically for the last 25 years, it has been our life. And our children both now work in music and music events. They're now in their 20s. So yeah, it's
they've lived and breathed it for so long. It sounds like they've just been brought up, haven't they, with that? So I suppose that's a natural thing.
Yeah. I mean, the festival started off in our back bedroom, and you know, the kids would have come out leafleting with us at weekends, and you know, spent half their summer backstage. But I think that's the reality of taking on, you know, this kind of a project when you're the only people driving it, and you have to create the project, and you have to create, you know, a livelihood for yourselves out of it and raise your own salary every year.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like you're doing okay, which is fab. Keep doing it, is all we can say, because it's incredible. And I hope it's been hugely inspiring to some of these guys on here that can see what you've achieved throughout that time. So thank you very much, Alison. Is there anybody else who's got any final comments or questions at all? Is there anybody else? Wonderful. Fabulous. Just one little bit of housekeeping. Bev is trying to figure out who SKD is and 501205. So if you wouldn't just mind popping your names over in a chat to Bev, just so that she can tick you off on the list, please. That would be greatly appreciated.
Or your organisation.
Oh,
just
the
so I can work out
organisation.
where you're from.
Either or would be fabulous if you could, just for a little bit of housekeeping. So that's SKD who's on here, and also 501205, please. That would be greatly appreciated. Wonderful. Do you want a picture as well, Bev, if we can get everybody to unmask themselves and unveil who they really are behind the names? If everybody wouldn't mind taking off their cameras, it would be lovely to see some faces, just so that Bev can take a nice photo of everybody, if that would be okay. Thank you very much. And she will tell us in a minute. She will warn us before she takes it.
I'll give you a 3, 2, 1, shall I?
Yeah, do
Ready?
that.
3, 2, 1. Smile. Thank you.
Fabulous. Thank you, Bev. Well, thank you very much to all of you for joining us over these talks. I hope you've learned something, developed a little, had a little inspiration, and whatever project you're doing, we wish you all the best for 2024, and we hope that your projects continue to be successful. And congratulations again, Alison, for being the lottery's Heritage Project of the Year. By the sounds of it, it's greatly deserved, and we're so chuffed that you've got the recognition of all that hard work that you've been doing for so many years. So thank you very much for talking to us today and cutting in half your celebration. So thank you very much. We really, really appreciate you being here.
Thanks very much. Thanks everyone for listening.
Wonderful. Thank you, everybody.